For the plug and play community, we hope that you'll learn about smart grid issues and think about how your solutions can perhaps be repurposed so that they can address some smart grid issues. And for the smart grid community people that are here, you'll be exposed to new startups and to other PMP areas of technology strengths, and we hope that you'll find perhaps some new answers to your existing challenges. So without much more time here, I'd really like to get us into the event itself. We have a very impressive list of panelists and speakers today and startup presenters. And one thing I just did want to point out to you is that our presenters don't necessarily represent the status quo. So you're going to be exposed to some pretty revolutionary thinking today over the course of this day. So without further ado, I'd like to provide an introduction for our first speaker, David Douthit, and he is the principal with the Industry Solutions Practice for Utilities at AT&T. He brings over 38 years of utility and telecom experience specializing in heavy AMR and AMI process, which means automated meter reading and automatic metering infrastructure, and he has much experience in building joint ventures and utility-owned business units with infrastructure to support meter and network asset management. And he's also managed quite a number of utility customer sales and support groups. I could go on, but instead I'd just rather turn over the mic to David now. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the generous opportunity to be here to speak with you today. And what I'm going to do is try to expose you a little bit to some of the kinds of things that are happening in the industry, what we at AT&T and the telecommunications industry in general have been doing with utilities, and maybe give you some insight into some of the opportunities that will present themselves. So with that, I'm going to see if I can do my magic here. If you hit the forward button, I've learned it works really well. Okay, so one of the things we like to think of in the utility space is that telecommunications and utilities have a lot of commonalities. We both face regulation from similar regulators at a state level and a federal level. We have network issues, albeit telecommunications we think is more complicated than energy, but if you talk to the energy folks, they'll argue that point with you. But the analogy I guess I'd like to draw for you is that utilities today are faced with something very unique. They're taking a 150-year-old infrastructure and trying to migrate it to the 21st century. They're trying to go from the analog world to the digital world, if you will. And I was trying to explain this to my son, and he said, well, Dad, what does that really mean? I said, it's like trying to change the tire on a bus while it's driving. You can't exactly turn it off or put it in the shop and work on it. It has to stay operational. So utilities are facing these kinds of things. We face them with our network in different ways. They're facing them with their network. So from a overview, I guess, utilities are faced with a lot of pressures today that many of us probably didn't give a whole lot of thought to, but there's everything from the regulatory environment, and for those of you from the state of California, if you follow this much, one of the local electric utilities here in the Bay Area got snarled up with smart grid and with some communications issues, and the end result was that it went all the way to the state legislature and the Public Utilities Commission to allow consumers to opt out of the smart grid, not utilize the benefits that were available to them. And quite frankly, that's sad because there are so many benefits. So collectively as an organization, we're all trying to work through that to provide the famous what's in it for me, because that's what the consumer is asking. From a utility viewpoint, pressures that they're feeling with aging infrastructure, certainly, trying to get more out of less. Interesting note, Governor Brown in the state of California on Tuesday of this week signed into law legislation that said by the year 2019, 33% of all of the energy consumed in the state of California will be from renewable sources. That's huge. And by the way, hydro is not renewable. Go figure that one out. I'm from the Seattle area, and to me, hydro is every bit renewable. We got lots of it, but we have dry rain too. So Certainly coal-fired, and that was a little attempt at humor, and nobody laughed. Okay. And I got to turn the page here because the jokes are out, and then we'll get back to we'll be serious about this. Okay, so I guess the point being is that we've got safety issues to deal with, the regulatory thing, we've got the constituency issues, and we've got an aging infrastructure and a finite resource that we're delivering today. So we have to deliver that in a more efficient manner. And that's one of the things that's opened up smart grid. And if you'll think of this with the same amount of production today of energy, of electricity, let us say, on an improved smart grid, you could drive an additional 20% of capacity out of the system because there's so many inefficiencies in this older technology. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. How many of you in this room know what smart grid is and what it's all about? Well, good. And there's a few that don't, so I'm going to take just a second and talk about that. In the world of distribution, smart grid is not a meter. Smart grid is much more than metering. Smart grid represents all of the command and control, the components, all of the pieces, the software, the interoperability, you'll hear that term. All of that fits together to form the smart grid, to allow a two-way communication system to more efficiently use what is available, to deliver it in a more reliable fashion, and to provide end benefit to the consumers. And that's in a nutshell what it's all about. So we look at it before. Remember, some of us remember, old Floyd came by with the route book, and he'd open it up the page, and he'd say, oh, there's where David Douthit lives, the cul-de-sac that time forgot. That's his meter, and they write down what the reading is. Well, today it's all done electronically. It's a two-way situation, and if David doesn't pay his bill, they could turn the power off. Or look at it another way, they can determine if the power is off and it should be on. Those are benefits. Okay, so automation, reliability, take the manual part of it away, provide control, and, oh, here's something new. Never had to worry about this before, security. We had physical security, certainly. That's the high fences around the substations. What about cybersecurity? As soon as you open up a two-way communications channel, you create a pathway, potentially, for people who have less than honorable intentions to go in and do things that are less than honorable to a distribution network. And so consequently, the federal government has mandated, the state governments have mandated, the industry has mandated, and the consumers have demanded that there be some kind of level of security built into this so that someone could not go sit down at the local hotspot and get on a laptop computer and hack the network and shut the grid down. Very, very important thing. Part of our national defense, it's actually got Homeland Security tied into it as well. So, hot buttons for the utilities. First and foremost is AMI, which has now become smart grid. That's to get the apparatus into the field to make it happen. That opens up a lot of opportunities. It's not just the meter, it's all the pieces that go with it. And then what do you do with it when you start collecting the information? If you think about this, when I read the meter once a month or once a quarter for revenue read, it was one reading. Today I might be looking at it every 15 minutes. That's 96 pieces of information a day times the number of meters in your system, and I'm going to keep that information forever. So now all of a sudden we have to scale. We have to scale the storage. So you're going to hear cloud computing and cloud storage and hosting and all of those things to deal with the data in a secure fashion. Well, then that leads to a discussion on business continuity and disaster recovery and that sort of thing. We're looking at, I have this information, what am I going to do with it? So we need data mining capability to analyze what I have, to be able to quickly find the answers to the questions, whether it be for rate planning or to determine load calculations, all of those kinds of things that fits into it. So very important meter data management systems. You're going to hear a lot about demand response being the euphemism for I want to go out and do things in the grid, and that could be everything from determine an outage to power quality monitoring, load calculations, transformer health. I'll give you a quick example. If I don't have a good system and everyone buys an electric vehicle, and those are coming, by the way, and you're going to see a lot of them on the West Coast before you see them elsewhere. I'll go back to the cul-de-sac that time forgot, where I live, and all 10 homes on the cul-de-sac bought an electric car. We all plugged it in to charge them at the same time. We blew the transformer off the pole. because we forgot to tell the utility that, oh my goodness, there's a load there that you hadn't calculated. Smart grid can help alleviate that. Home automation is coming. It's well underway, but it opens up a whole new area for software and hardware platforms to help consumers manage what they have, help the utilities manage what they're delivering, and quite frankly, the quality of life that we have. And we'll spend some time after this session visiting and talking about that. And then lastly, let's not forget, I got to deliver an accurate bill. If I have a good system, I can do that, all right? Okay, so from a telecommunications viewpoint, we play in a lot of spaces. And I want you to think in terms of something beyond your father's BlackBerry. At one time it was wireline services, and then it became mobility or wireless services. And everybody had one of these, right? Everybody got one of these on them? Did you all put them on vibrate or silent so that it doesn't interrupt my talk? Okay. Well, if you're really cool, you have two of them, right? But you got to be cool to have two. Okay. We're tethered. You can't escape. My boss can reach out and touch me anytime he wants to, and he does. My point being is that we're hungry for access, we're hungry for information, we're hungry for that connection. So in the telecommunications business, we're involved in that, certainly, traditional voice. Now we get into the world of data, and with smart grid, there's all manner of data and things that are out there that need to be collected and managed, and there need to be systems to deal with that. We like to think we're involved in that. You'll hear the term interoperability, which is code for everything has to kind of work together. So think of Microsoft, and think of it as Apple working together seamlessly with Android on a seamless platform that looks something like this. Is that possible today? Not yet. In somebody's mind, maybe. We'd like to think that could happen. Okay, we're involved in communications, data transport, machine to machine, cloud computing, hosting, storage. We play in that space with utilities with specialized offerings. The smart grid is a huge piece of this, and it represents everything from the modernization of the distribution network all the way through what's going on at generation and transmission. Again, getting more out of existing without having to build new sources of generation. Okay, now I promised our folks in the marketing group that I would do some statistics. So now this is when you start writing stuff down, and I have to refer to the tablet because I decided that I wasn't going to memorize this part. Smart grid growth by the year 2015, we expect to see it almost double. This is according to the Green Tech Media folks. They put a study together and they said by 2015 the smart grid will represent about $9.6 billion in opportunity. Talking about the automatic metering infrastructure portion and the transition through smart grid, the AMI piece is going to taper off, smart grid is going to go up. Distribution automation is going to replace AMI. And distribution automation represents about $5.6 billion worth of opportunity in the short term. Home area networks only cover 6% of the homes in America today. It's a huge growth area, not only in smart grid but elsewhere. And we think that the whole smart grid enterprise in general is just going to grow like crazy. So let's talk a little bit about this. Here's a little graphic that shows the distribution network for a typical electric utility. It shows transmission, it shows generation, it shows distribution, it shows the end users. And there's fancy words up there like banks, synchrophasers. What does all that mean? It just means that they're devices that require two-way communications to provide quality service, reliable service, notify outage, that sort of thing. You can have a play in that because, believe me, the utilities are hungry for solutions to meet some of the issues that are being created by this. Distribution automation is or referred to as DA sometimes, and there's a whole bunch of components to it. And I mean, we could spend a whole 6-hour seminar just talking about it, but fundamentally it starts out with substation activity and sensors and hardware and software, everything from security to power quality. And oh yes, new term, distributed generation. How about that for a new one? That means I'm going to have a solar array on my house, and the utility has no choice. They're going to buy that energy from me. And they're going to put it and use it and pay me a premium. And then at nighttime, when I need energy because it's dark outside, I'll buy it back at a lower rate. The goal being that maybe I could be at a lower energy bill, maybe even net positive. Distributed generation represents a whole new era for us, a whole new platform for us. You can have a play in that. And we get into other things, line sensors and fault indicators and all kinds of technical things that the industry uses. And let me tell you, all of it is analog today, and it's being reinvented and repurposed. People are doing things with software today that they never dreamed was possible, eliminating the need for some hardware. Kind of an interesting thing. Ultimately, you get to the AMI piece, which is the consumer, the meter. And oh, by the way, we have disconnect devices, we have load control devices. So did you know that in a true smart grid, if I shut your refrigerator off for 5 minutes, you'd never see it, would you? Unless you were looking for a sandwich or something and the lights were out. But think about it. Would the refrigerator lose power? Would it, if it was off for 5 minutes, would that hurt anything? No. Same thing with the freezer. Hot water tank, you can shut it down for 10 or 15 minutes. My daughter's living proof. She takes a 20-minute shower and it doesn't run out of water. Of course, we have a tank about the size of the state of Montana, but that has nothing to do with anything. My point being is that I can shed load around, and if I turned off 100,000 hot water tanks for 5 minutes and I roll that around, or I took an air conditioner and shut off the compressor section for 5 minutes, left the fans going, it's good. And I can lower my load, all right? Opportunity in that arena. Just want you to know there's a lot of people already playing in this game. And on the software side, I'm sure there's a couple of names you may have seen up there. On the hardware side, everything from electric vehicles to the meter companies to the outage advisors, different people doing things. The network looks like something like this. So you can see from our viewpoint, the fully integrated network has storage, it has hosting, it has wireless, wireline, consulting, all manner of networking, employee safety, it goes on, and we'll talk about those offline if you'd like. And then finally, because I'm running out of time, I have one last thing to say, because that is my last slide. I wanted to show something to you to show you that things are moving, okay? I brought this along because the utilities think this thing is the greatest thing since sliced bread. What does that look like to you? Well, it does look like a BlackBerry, actually. More generically, a smartphone. Did you know this is also a satellite phone? Now, our network is the most reliable in the world. You know that. We never have outages. You know that as well. But once in a while, if something like that happens, what do you do if you're a utility and you have to have communications? It's mission critical. Well, I can use this for my day-to-day stuff. If the network goes funny, I hit one button, I now talk to the satellite. Just dial it up, I can do my Outlook, I can surf the web, make dinner reservations, all through the satellite. And if you get into one of those areas that's maybe on the fringe or kind of out of range, or you think you're in trouble, they make this very handsome, attractive case with a, not for me, but utilities are using it. And lastly, what's this? Smartphone, thank you very much. It's a dual core processor smartphone. What's this? Well, it looks like a notebook. It's actually a dumb terminal. And I can take this phone and I can snap it on the back of this. And all of a sudden now what I have is a telephone that becomes a computer. So utilities are using these in the field. The worker goes back to the truck, snaps it in the truck, and he now has a terminal they can use to communicate. One device. Plus more software applications and opportunities than you can imagine. So that's all I had to say about that. I've gone over. The red light is blinking. I can see the hook coming, so I'm out of here. Thank you.